a September 15th, 2020 Washington County Board of Commissioners meeting. Mr. Board Clerk Kevin Moss, could you take the roll, please?
Thank you, Chair Harrington. Just a few announcements to make sure. For members of the public, we are conducting this meeting completely virtually with essential staff members of Washington County in the auditorium. We have noticed this online on our website, as well as notices on our public doors that we are doing it virtually due to the air quality concerns across the state. So we want to make sure you're aware of that. With that, the Washington County Board of Commissioners meeting also as the Board of Directors for Clean Water Services and all other county service districts is now meeting in regular session September 15th, 2020. Commissioner Willie.
Here.
Commissioner Rogers.
Here.
Commissioner Treese.
Here.
Vice Chair Scouten.
Here.
Chair Harrington.
Here. Thank you. The first item on our agenda today is oral communication. As usual, I want to note that we did receive our weekly constituent communication report as put together by our great staff. The amount of emails other than those relative to public hearings has slowed. We have received 6 different emails, 3 with regard to COVID-19, 1 with regard to racial justice and police accountability, and 2 with regard to the Planning Commission. Mr. Moss, do we have anyone signed up to speak with us during oral communication today?
Yes, we do, Madam Chair. We have Mr. Dale Feek. So, Dale, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Kevin?
We can hear you. Please go ahead for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Dale Feek, Chair, Washington County Citizen Action Network, Chair Harrington, Commissioner Willie, who I saw yesterday, and other commissioners. My topic is climate change. Previously, I played Greta Thunberg's United speech to you for during the 5-minute time. I shared with you information about the 21 youth who are suing the federal government on climate change. I let you know 2 books on science, funny one on the way to extinction, and book Storms of My Grandchildren. They're science-based. Now, my wife and I are at home 24 hours a day except for getting food and attending medical appointments because of COVID pandemic and wildfire smoke. We no longer see our 2 to 5-year-old granddaughters outside with their masks on because they don't have the 95 masks. So we're very saddened. My wife and I are saddened by our not being able to hold and hug our grandchildren, as I know you are, some of the commissioners. However, we are deeply saddened because of the family who have died from wildfires, people who have lost their homes through burning, the people who are living in evacuation shelters, and the people who have no shelters or basic life and are at the mercy of the ravages of climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic. President Donald Trump on Monday argued with one California official about climate change's role in the wildfires raging through the West. The Secretary of Natural Resources in California told the president during a briefing on the fires that state officials want to work with you to really recognize the changing climate and what it means to our forests. Trump said, "It'll start getting cooler, you just watch." I wish that he would understand science. Therefore, as an elected county commissioner, commissioners, please do everything you can to elect people that believe in science as you've been evidenced as you do with the pandemic. Please follow Governor Brown's lead too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feek.
Kevin, do we have anyone else signed up?
We do not for this section, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, before we proceed with the agenda, I just want to note that on today's agenda, we have 2 different presentations and 3 public hearings. And you all, of course, have a right to speak with each of those during our public meeting. So to help foster that, I've written an alphabetical list down for myself. So I'll be calling folks in the following order: Commissioners Rogers, Commissioner Scouten, Commissioner Treese, then Commissioner Willie. And then I'll do a double check as well before moving on, just to help with a little bit of structure as we all try to practice good etiquette and muting and unmuting and all that jazz. So thank you. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. We have no changes to our agenda today. Today's consent agenda consists of the minutes from August 25th, 2020, one item from Clean Water Services, one item under Land Use and Transportation, one item under County Administrative Office, one item under Housing Services, two items under Support Services, and one item under Service District for lighting.
Move for approval, Madam Chair.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve today's consent agenda. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you, commissioners. Next, we'll have a presentation on COVID-19 as well as wildfire smoke. A couple of different public health crises going on at the same time. So I'd like to welcome Marnie Kyle, our Director of Health and Human Services, as well as Mr. John Wheeler, our Emergency Operations Manager here at Washington County. Take it away. Marnie, we can't hear you yet.
Okay, there you go. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I unmuted myself or Kevin unmuted me. But anyway, good morning, Chair Harrington and Board. Marnie Kyle, Director of Health and Human Services. I'm going to be relatively quick today with information that's not too new, so that you have a chance to ask questions about phase 2 and the wildfire smoke impacts. So next slide, please. We'll go through the numbers as normal, starting with the Oregon state numbers, cumulative cases. Now we're up to 29,484. That is a statewide case rate of 700 cases per 100,000. And that sounds like a big number, but you'll see in the next slide that that is a relatively small number compared to several other states. Cumulative deaths in Oregon is 511, and we do continue to see a downward trend in the statewide average hospitalizations. So that's all good news. Next slide. So moving into Washington County, and you can see that as normal, I've put up the comparison to the last time we had a presentation, which was August 31st. So we have now a total of 3,986 confirmed cases and an additional 142 presumptive cases. 312 hospitalizations, and unfortunately, we have had 56 of our Washington County residents that have died from COVID-19. And these are not cumulative numbers, these are this week's numbers. So the number of outbreaks in long-term care facilities is sitting at 14 currently. We have 3 other congregate setting outbreaks, 20 workplace outbreaks, and 2 daycare camp outbreaks. We can go to the next slide. So this is just a comparison so that you can see how Oregon is doing compared to other states, with some highlights on our West Coast numbers. So you can see case rates or incident rates are a good way for us to compare across states because it uses a per 100,000 population base. Oregon, as I said, has 700 cases per 100,000 people, and that is one of the lowest in the United States. Not the lowest, but one of the lowest. We have death. The Oregon has 12 COVID-19 deaths per 100,000, so also one of the lower, and our cumulative rate since beginning the pandemic. So as difficult as all of this is, we are doing better than some states. So we can be proud of our community and our state for really jumping in there and staying home, wearing our mask, and doing a lot of the public health measures to keep us healthy and safe. So we can go to the next slide. So this is a comparison of our public health region's readiness. And these, as you can remember, are the phase 2 readiness indicators. And Washington County is up at the top. And you can see that Washington County this week is meeting 5 of the 6 indicators. And I would also argue that we're doing well on the percent of positive tests. It is trending upward for the second week, but we still are well below the 5% mark. So that is good news. So what I would remind you, though, is that we need to consistently hit these marks for at least 2 weeks, and we're tied to the region. And as you can see, the rest of the counties in our region are still struggling, especially with the percent of cases that are not traced back to a known source within 7 days. And then Multnomah County is still not able to meet the 95% mark on initiating case investigation and contact tracing within 24 hours. So we still have work to do, but we're definitely heading in the right direction. Next slide. So these are the school readiness metrics. And again, you can see that Washington County is trending really well. So the metric for having in-person kindergarten through 3rd grade classroom instruction is a case rate of 30 per 100,000. And so you can see that we have met that metric this week. But for that to happen, we have to meet that metric 3 weeks in a row. And we also have met the test positivity for 3 weeks in a row. So we're looking good on that front, but we are concerned about the potential of a post-Labor Day bump. So we'll have to see if we can maintain this metric for the next 2 weeks in a row. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. This is just a reminder that we are, we continue to look better, but we need to remain vigilant. We're still really not back to the levels that we were at when we were all staying home, when our businesses and community was really closed. We don't want to go there again. We want to continue on the path that we're going, but we still have work to do. So I'll shift from the numbers to just a few. We can go to the next slide. A few updates on some of the prevention programs that we continue to offer. And this is just a snippet. We're still doing a lot of work around isolation and quarantine, contact tracing, case investigation, supporting those families. So, but a couple of areas that I thought you would be interested in today. So one is our homeless COVID prevention. We have more people, 20 that are currently enrolled in our hotel voucher program. We've had up to 61 participants in our Safe Sleeping Village. 11 people have exited from that. Some have exited because they may not have been able to follow the rules. And some have exited because they've actually been moved into supportive housing services. And what I wanted to also let you know is that because of the smoke, the air quality public health concern, we have temporarily located all of the Safe Sleeping Village participants to Comfort Inn and Suites, our respite center. And the staff also that were supporting that effort have been moved to the Comfort Inn and Suites just to keep everybody out of the smoke. We are hopeful that we can begin to move them back to the Safe Sleeping Village on Friday, depending on the air quality. So that's the plan. In addition, we have been distributing the KN95 face coverings to folks that, for whatever reason, either haven't been able to access shelter through the hotel vouchers, through Family Promise, or through our Safe Sleeping Village, or those that just don't want to be indoors. So we are working with the sheriff's office to get the masks out to the Family Promise shelter, outreach staff, and daycare staff. And we also, the deputies, as they're out and about, have KN95 masks to distribute if they see people that are homeless that could use the mask. So that is happening as well. And then the last update on homeless prevention, which isn't necessarily on the slide, but just a heads up, we are working with the city of Hillsborough on a plan to support the growing RV, car, and tent camping that is happening over by the ball fields on the West Side Commons property. And so we've put some planning in motion to try to support them. Similar, it will be very similar to the Safe Sleeping Village supports that we have. Okay. So we can go to the next slide. Just a quick update on what's happening with the school-age learning support. The child care grants that are being facilitated through MESO. We have verified 226 emergency daycare providers. And so those funds are headed out the door. So that's about $2.5 million. And then we have had up to an additional 100 applications, and we're just verifying that they are licensed to provide childcare during the emergency situation. Once that is done, then we should be able to fund anyone else that's verified. And then the school district early learning support is moving along. We have learned from Gaston and Banks, the more that they looked at this, and then I think with the fire emergency piled on top of COVID, they're really feeling that they're unable to accept the funding and to participate in this program. And so we're having conversations with the superintendents and with staff to think about, well, what can we do to support these more rural districts and communities and families. So there's a couple of ideas that have popped up that we will be bringing back to you next week as we work through that. Sherwood and Forest Grove, their school boards have approved the IGA. So that is, we're finalizing those steps and getting signatures through our process, and then their funding will be going out. And then the bigger districts, it's a little bit more of a process. So they're working through some contract questions and working with their school boards to get, with their district boards to get approval of the IGAs, but we do anticipate that will be finalized very soon. Okay. So then quickly turning to phase 2, reopening. What I wanted to let you know, just as a reminder, which you well know, we are still tied to Multnomah and Clackamas County. And so we have been working with the governor's office and with Oregon Health Authority to really clarify what is the process going to be. Is each county going to apply separately? Is there one regional application? Who makes the final decision? And so we're really trying to push them. But, you know, like all of us, they also have the fire emergency piled on top of them. And so the last week or 10 days has been a little bit quiet on that connection with OHA, as they really have been dealing with the urgency of the fire response. As you saw, our data supports Washington County moving forward in phase 2. If you only looked at our metrics for the last week or two, we're meeting 4 to 6 or 5 of 6 in the last couple of weeks. But at this point, our recommendation to county administration was that we support the regional public health recommendation, that we continue to look at our data at least 1 more week, possibly 2 weeks, before we make an application to apply to move into phase 2. And the reasons will sound really familiar to you all over the course of this COVID pandemic. One of the reasons is we're concerned about a post-Labor Day bump. And the last thing that we would want to do is to move into phase 2 and then get pushed back because we, either our hospitals or our public health system is overwhelmed. And you'll remember that the incubation period is typically 7 to 10 days. And so waiting another week gets us well into one incubation period, some into another, but depending on what the numbers say, we may recommend 1 more additional week. The other is Clackamas County in particular is very concerned about the impact of the evacuations. And so they're working through that. And because we're tied regionally, we want to respect and honor their request to give this at least 1 more week and come back. And then the last thing is just to let you know that public health staff, myself and Tricia, will participate with Chair Harrington on the Tri-County Chair meeting tomorrow, where this will be discussed with all 3 public health leaders and the chairs. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions, because from there I'm moving on to air quality and then giving John Wheeler a chance to talk about fire response.
Commissioner Rogers, do you have any questions or comments?
A comment and a question. I'm really conflicted. I've supported the science and I continue to support the science, but we keep stressing that we don't want to be pushed back, but we never move forward. So I guess it doesn't matter if we get pushed back. And I at least want to say from my neck of the county, people are growing very, very weary of never moving forward, and they're very, very weary of being tethered to the other 2 counties. And so as much as I try to say that I have supported this regional approach, people are pushing back mightily and saying that enough is enough. So I'm not sure if I like the 2 weeks. I understand the week. I guess I'm a science guy too, who likes to follow science, but at some point you just have to say, we've got to make the leap. So that's my comments. My question is that, first of all, I'd say thank you for showing me the other states, because I've been asked that question numerous times, and I see that we're good with in comparison to other states. But what would you attribute that to? I mean, I'm pretty proud of that, but would you attribute us to be more diligent in our approach, or why are we so low compared to others?
Yeah. That's a great question, and I'm sure that the scientists and epidemiologists are going to look at that for future learning. My best guess is it's a multitude of things. So one is we are a little bit of a less dense state than some of our other Western states. The other is I feel like we did do a good job of jumping on both the public health response quickly, and our leadership really embraced the best public health science at the time, which was the stay home and save lives, the physical distancing, wearing, as the mask wearing became evident in the science, we embraced that. And for the most part, our residents really did follow those recommendations. So I think it probably has to do with our population density, our movement, and our embrace of public health science and willingness to make the sacrifices that we all made for those 3-ish months and continue to make. But that's just, my thoughts. I'm sure that the scientific community will study that because there's going to be a lot that we can learn from looking at the different states and how we responded to this and what that impact was on the prevalence, incidence, death rates, hospitalizations, all of those things.
Anything else, Commissioner Rogers? Okay, we'll move on to Vice Chair Commissioner Scouten.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. I do support the concept of waiting until we at least get past the Labor Day bump. I think that's just being really prudent. We can't forget that we're not really going to have a good economy and really be able to effectively open up businesses if we continue to struggle with the COVID. The two are inextricably intertwined and related to each other. So we need to solve both. I'd love to be able to open up more, but let's just see how things look in a couple of weeks. And then the final comment is, yeah, we look good compared to other states, but frankly, the United States is an extremely low bar. We're doing abysmally as a country compared to the rest of the industrialized world. Interesting to see what the numbers are for Europe and East Asia. And I think there would be some, unfortunately, we have room for improvement. Our good performance is relative to a really badly performing country. It's embarrassing, frankly. I wish we were doing better as a country. Thank you.
Commissioner Treese?
First of all, thank you, Marnie. I think you did a great job. I appreciate the overview. I have no further questions.
Commissioner Willie?
Yeah, I have 2 questions, and I apologize for the background noise. If you can hear it, my landscaper has decided today is the day to clean up all of the storm mess. In regards to all of the smoke issues that we have been enduring for the past 5 days now, isn't that going to help basically our case count? Because the couple of times I have ventured out, it's pretty quiet out there. So isn't that going to help keep our case count down, which would actually hopefully also help avoid the spike from the Labor Day holiday? So do we have any information that would trend that direction?
I think that is what I think we'll get a good idea of that in the next week or two. I think in Washington County, probably more people were able to shelter in place or stay home. But there's real concern about the evacuations that took place. I know our hotels, for example, were full. We were having difficulty finding places for our homeless population using our hotel vouchers because the hotel rooms were full. And even evacuees, it was difficult to find open rooms. So yes, a lot of people were able to stay home, but a large population from Clackamas County in particular had to evacuate. And so there was more mixing with families. Some of those families may have been in our area, and there was more loading of hotels, which means people were also probably having to access other services. So it's a we'll see answer. Possible, but we'll see.
Okay, well, and I would tend to agree with Commissioner Rogers that I'd like us to be able to keep a close eye on moving into phase 2 as soon as possible. And if being tethered to the other 2 counties is an issue, I think our business communities and everyone else is going to give us additional pushback on the need to move to phase 2. But that's just my commentary. In regards to, if you would go back to the early learning slide, I think it was.
It's down.
Yeah, I think it's further ahead than that. I think you hit it.
A couple more. One more. There you go.
There, yeah. Could you? I didn't catch why Gaston and Banks are unable to participate again. Could you explain that to me?
So their concern was one, it's the federal CARES funding, and they're concerned that they don't have the capacity, or the staff to man it, to put the program in place. They don't have a provider that's easily identified like the other school districts. They don't have as much space, and they don't have the staff capacity to manage the requirements of the CARES federal grant. So we're looking at partnerships with other school districts, and we're also looking at, and I hesitate, we're just looking at other options that would support the needs of the family, that may be very different, but the goal of this program was to help parents get back to work and to reduce the educational gap that we're concerned about when some parents don't have access to learning support. So we're looking at what are some alternative ways to meet those goals, versus the sort of on-site learning programs that the other school districts have been putting in place. And we can talk a little bit more about that if it's helpful.
Okay. No, thank you. I appreciate that. I haven't had any conversations with the cities, but generally I talk to the mayors, not to the school superintendents or the school folks. So I guess that's why I hadn't heard this. And then lastly is on the childcare grants that's just above that. It looks to me like we had $4 million allocated. Is that correct on that? And if the 100 applications get verified, we'd be at about $3.5 million. Is that correct?
I think that's about right. Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Yep.
Okay, so Marnie, I know you have another section to deal with wildfire and smoke. I just want to share that while, I've been staying home. Yesterday, I needed to head to the office to pick something up for our meetings today. Luckily, I was able to find a single N95 mask in the bottom of one of my earthquake kits. And I was grateful for it. It helped a lot. My coughing has gone down. I was really surprised at how many of our community members were out and about. The Costco parking lot that I go by on my commute to and from work was, as usual, full, which was really surprising to me given the unhealthy air conditions. But, that's just a commentary. While I had assumed that folks that were able to work from home would continue to stay home as they did over the weekend, folks really were out and about yesterday. I'm also a little curious about the case numbers that we might see over the next week or so, given that some of the testing sites have had to close temporarily because of the smoke conditions here in Washington County, but also in the other counties as well. So it's going to be an interesting experience over the next week or so to see what we have, what data we have available to us, and how we go through this. I too want to see our economy recover as quickly as possible, and to see that the added flexibility that phase 2 allows over phase 1 is something that our businesses and other vendors can take advantage of but we don't want to let this virus get out of control. So we'll see what happens and how the science information that you're able to provide for us draw certain conclusions. So at this point, why don't we turn it back over to you to take us through fires and smoke?
We'll go to, yep, there we go. So this is the air quality numbers as of just a little before 5 a.m. this morning. And I looked briefly right before this meeting, and the numbers have improved slightly, but they're all still over 300. And as a reminder, 300 or higher is the hazardous range. And hazardous means that it's hazardous to everyone's health, regardless of whether you have underlying health conditions or whether you're elderly. Hazardous is really the level where it's unhealthy for everybody. So we're definitely still in a hazardous situation. We can go to the next slide. So the public health recommendations, and you've heard these before, but I think it's helpful for our public to continue to hear the most important recommendation. And I heard a physician on the news this morning say, priority 1, 2, and 3 is to stay indoors and keep your doors and windows closed if you're able to do that. Just like with COVID, we know that there's essential workers out there who are not able to do that. And so we really want them to hear as much as possible, stay indoors when you can. If you are in your vehicle, to make sure that your air is not recirculating, or that your air is recirculating, that it's recirculating, that you're not bringing the air from outside in. Set your home thermostat fan to the on position so that the system is not drawing air from outside. Avoid any unnecessary travel. And as I said the other day, that's both to protect your own lungs and heart and physical self, but it's also to keep roads cleared for those that need to be on the road for emergency situations, including there are still some evacuations taking place. The other is just a reminder, as we just talked about, COVID-19 is still with us. So reminding people about the importance of physical distancing and bringing face coverings if they do have to go to any kind of shelter situation, or if they have to join a household that's different than the household that they've been living in, they really should consider physical distancing and face coverings. And then also the face coverings that we typically use, the cloth face covering, the surgical mask, the bandanas, they really don't protect you from smoke. So the only recommended protection from the smoke is N95 respirators that have been fit tested. And we know that those are in short supply because of the need to provide those to our healthcare community. And just reminding everybody to sign up for public alerts so that you do receive emergency notifications quickly. Next slide. So just a quick review of what public health has been working on. I think I've talked about all of this. I've already talked about the Safe Sleeping Village resident change and the distribution of the KN95 mask. Other than that, we're just really trying to support Philip and his team in getting out public health messages to everyone to protect themselves by staying indoors. And then next slide is where I am now going to turn it over to John Wheeler, our Emergency Management Program Manager.
Thank you, Marnie, and thank you, commissioners. Again, my name is John Wheeler, Emergency Management Manager for Washington County. Just to follow up on, start my briefing to follow up on Marnie's discussion of the smoke. Obviously, the county is closed to the public today, and that's something that will be evaluated. In terms of the prognosis, just for your awareness, here is that The conditions should moderate a little bit today. They will still remain hazardous. And then tomorrow, as the front that's generating the weather that we currently have that's offshore and sort of breaking apart as it comes onshore will move to the northwest tomorrow. And unfortunately, the forecast is for that to draw some more smoke into the valley. So we actually may see a worsening of conditions tomorrow. Thursday is a bit up in the air, pardon the pun right now, but where we may see some mixing. There is some moisture in the forecast, particularly for later in the day. And then we may see some additional mixing. And so there might be some improvement in conditions, particularly later in the day. But the primary day where we'll see hopefully some steady improvement is over the course of the day on Friday. And then on the weekend, we'll get a more substantial northwest flow in the atmosphere, and that should hopefully we'll really see some substantial clearing in the area. Good news for us, bad news for the folks that are to the southeast of us, because we're going to push the smoke towards them at that point. So unfortunately, in the short term, the weather conditions and the smoke conditions look to continue at least through Thursday, again moderate a little bit on Friday, and then clear up over the weekend. So I thought I might pause there just to see if there are any questions on that before I go into the wildfire presentation. Okay, great. Well, good. Let me give you a briefing on about the wildfires and windstorm, and as you might know from the great wildfire updates that our Joint Information Center has produced and from the situation reports, this might be more of a recap of our wildfire activity as opposed to a briefing on any current wildfire activity. Generally, we're in pretty good shape in Washington County in terms of our wildfire response. Starting with the power line fire, that's the fire that's to the south of Hagg Lake. That reached 100% containment on Sunday. All of the evacuation levels were lifted, so the map is cleared there. There's no level 1s, 2s, or 3s for that area. The Oregon Department of Forestry, who is delegated authority for that fire for the previous few days, has turned that fire back to the Gaston Rural Fire District. They're just doing some monitoring of hotspots at this point, and then for the most part cleaning up, and all power is restored to that area. Next slide. For the Chehalem Mountain Bald Peak Fire, that reached the Tuolumne Valley Fire and Rescue reported 100% containment yesterday. That still has evacuation areas in it. The level 3 evacuation area, which we folks know is when the actual evacuation is ordered. The final small section that was in that area was lifted. So there's a level 2 and a level 1 area that remains for that. So basically the residents in that area have been allowed to return. However, they need to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. And there again, power has been restored to that area. I think it's important to understand for both fires is that when you have fires that have this intensity and cover this amount of ground, is that you can have a little smoldering hot spots that continue on for some weeks. You know, in big wildfires, they can even continue on to October and November. And so our fire agencies are going to be monitoring that activity, but for the most part, those fires are controlled. Those fire agencies are also now, both TVF&R and our West Side fire agencies are also now supporting fires in other communities, particularly in Clackamas County. Next slide. The other operational activity that continues as of right now is, of course, the animal sheltering activity at the fairgrounds. As of now, I understand actually as of this morning, talking to Leah, is that there are 190 animals. Those animals are all from Clackamas and Marion counties. At this point, all the Washington County animals were reunified with their owners and left the fairgrounds on Friday and Saturday. They actually got up to a peak population of 336 animals on Friday. At this point, they've made contact with all the animal owners, and they've come up with plans. Most of the animals will be reunified here in the next day or two. There'll be some remaining through Friday, and maybe just one animal that will need to wait until Saturday. All in all, they're not receiving any more animals, and they're involved in reunifying those animals and getting them out of the fairgrounds. That obviously has been a really impressive operation since the beginning. The fairgrounds, with support from Animal Services, the Sheriff's Posse, and the 4-H, have done just an exemplary job in managing a fast-paced, challenging 24-hour operation with support from, in addition to the Sheriff's Posse and 4-H, the Humane Society, Animal Services. Of course, the Sheriff's Office has supported it with a command vehicle out there to give them a space to get out of the smoke. Facilities and other organizations have all mobilized to support that effort. So that's been definitely something to be proud of. Next slide. A quick summary of the mass care and shelter activity that occurred. We activated, or sites were activated, some of them ad hoc, to serve as reception sites. The primary one, of course, was the Mountainside High School. It actually closed down as of 1 p.m. on Sunday. They really had a trail off in activity at that point after they started to open up the evacuation areas. Brown Park in Gaston, and I should also mention the high school parking lot in Gaston received some RVs and some evacuees, but that's actually an area where the citizens that had to evacuate from the power line fire just ended up at, and the city of Gaston graciously hosted them there and allowing camping and RV sites in that area for the residents. The fairgrounds also has served as mostly as an RV parking area, not just if you have an animal. They also did support a couple of some RVs parking in that area. I believe they've just had one or two in the past few days. And then shortly, in the immediate period after the power line fire took off, Neil Armstrong Middle School also opened up briefly and received a few RVs out there as well to support the evacuees, mostly from the power line fire. Great appreciation should go out to the Beaverton School District for their great work at the Mountainside High School and to Forest Grove School District for Neil Armstrong. Beaverton School District maintains staffing at Mountainside throughout the weekend, 24 hours. And they were really pressed into service on a pretty short turnaround, and they quickly opened up the school and were hosts to the people that were in their parking lot. And as I'll mention here and on the next slide, they also received many spontaneous donations as well. We also did coordinate with the Red Cross. We did arrange for 15 hotel rooms, a reservation of 15 hotel rooms, as hotel rooms were at a premium to support any additional evacuees that we found out about. But for the most part, fortunately, those were underutilized by us because we just didn't have the evacuees, the non-Clackamas County evacuees that needed any support. And so the Red Cross has been able to use those. We've had very generous outpourings of support in terms of spontaneous donations from our community. You can go and advance to the next slide there. Here's hopefully you can see that. That's a shot of Mountainside High School and I think just a partial collection of all of the donated stuff that ended up at Mountainside High School once people found out that was a place where evacuees were being received. Here again, Beaverton School District, we really appreciate the work they did in managing these spontaneous donations. They actually moved some of these out to Brown Park in Gaston to support the folks that were in their RVs and camping there, and also worked with our logistics team and the Emergency Operations Center to take care of the rest of these spontaneous donations. Some of these did get used by evacuees. But for the most part, though greatly appreciated, these were not needed to a great extent by the evacuees. Again, Beaver Run School District and our team did a good job of taking care of a lot of these resources. Still, the message, our message in the county and in the region and the state continues to be that if people want to support evacuees and support victims of this fire, the best way to do that is, of course, to make a donation to an organization, a charitable organization that is involved in the response, such as the American Red Cross or Team Rubicon or Oregon Voluntary Organizations active in disaster and others. Though greatly appreciated, this sort of demonstrates somewhat of the challenge that's involved in receiving spontaneous donations. Next slide. And to close out our mass care and shelter summary, I also wanted to mention that one of our objectives in the Emergency Operations Center and in amongst our stakeholders was to be ready to support Clackamas County, and we have provided various support, such as with the fairgrounds, to Clackamas County in receiving animals there. One of the other areas of concern for us is if there was going to be a need for additional evacuation support for Clackamas County or possibly other counties. And so we worked with our emergency management partners, with the cities, school districts, and faith-based community to come up with a contingency plan for that eventuality. So Beaver Run Foursquare Church stepped up, Sunrise Church as well in Hillsborough. All were very generous in basically saying that whatever is needed, we will provide. We also came up with a plan for using CERT, or Citizen Emergency Response Team, and other volunteers that are active in the community. We had a plan to basically mobilize them if needed to support staffing for those shelters if we needed them. We have a shelter trailer at the Walnut Street Center, which provides 100 cots, blankets, and supplies for 100 people. And then we had an activation procedure in case we needed to do that. So fortunately, this was something that was not needed. The Convention Center shelter in Washington County, or excuse me, in Multnomah County was able to meet a lot of the need that they had. But I think it's good to understand that because of a good, strong partnership and great sort of last moment coordination amongst our cities and other partners, as we were I think in a state of readiness to be able to accept those evacuees. Next slide. Next, to talk about the disaster, give you a situation update on disaster assistance. So we are at the phase now in this incident where we're looking at cost recovery here in the county and statewide. We do have the FMAG grant that's been approved for the 2 fires. FMAG is the Fire Management Assistance Grant. That can provide 75% reimbursement to the agencies that were involved in the firefighting operations. So that includes the fire agencies, their volunteer firefighters, and then any support agencies like LUT and the Sheriff's Office and Park Services that were involved in responding to those fires. And then the governor, you may have heard yesterday that the governor requested a major disaster declaration from the White House. So that would be the request was for a statewide presidential disaster declaration. If approved, that would bring in federal disaster assistance in the state, as we're currently eligible for, by the way, for the COVID incident through the FEMA disaster assistance program. The request specifically for Washington County was for public assistance, and that provides reimbursement for public agencies, for the public sector, and for certain private nonprofit organizations that may be involved in the response. The one hurdle that we would need to reach in order to be eligible for that grant is that the county must reach a certain per capita threshold. For Washington County, that equates to a little more than $2 million. And so we need to have up to that amount of damage and that amount of public costs in order to be eligible for that public assistance program. One of the things we're going to be doing, we're doing now and over the next few days, is doing a damage assessment process to try and evaluate the extent of the damages and also the response costs in the county, so that we can determine whether we can meet that threshold. Unfortunately, some of our partners that we're working with on that damage assessment, because of the smoke, they're prohibited from going out and taking a look at some of the damage. So we're a little bit held up by that, but we'll be working to do that over the next few days. And then the last thing I'll mention on this, just for awareness, is that in case you're wondering, mutual aid agencies. So we have a lot of mutual aid being provided to other jurisdictions, at the sheriff's office, obviously the work that's been done at the fairgrounds and elsewhere. Typically, if we do seek reimbursement there, we would be reimbursed through the requesting jurisdiction. So for instance, we go through Clackamas County to request reimbursement for any costs that we want to get reimbursed for from that. And then I believe that's the last slide. The last thing I'll mention is just in terms of the public information and emergency coordination operation, is that we are looking at scaling down the EOC operation because as the fires have died down and we're just dealing with sort of residual issues, we were talking about today, and most likely we'll deactivate after today. Likewise, the Joint Information Center, Philip, Julie, and their team, and they, by the way, as you can tell, have been doing just excellent work in getting out information to the public with their daily updates, their regional coordination, really playing even a leadership role in the region in coordinating public information. They'll also look at scaling down their operation here in the next 24 to 48 hours or so, just so you're aware of that. With that, that's the update, and I'm certainly open to any questions.
Okay, commissioners, we'll go through the rounds again. Commissioner Rogers, any questions or comments?
Two questions, John. Thanks for your update. First one's the easy one. What do you know about any roads in Washington County that I'm not talking about neighborhood, but arterials, collectors, anything closed?
No, not from the wildfire activity. Okay. Yeah, Keith Lewis this morning mentioned that pretty much everything is open back up.
My second question, and I don't mean to be testy with it, but we keep calling these wildfires, but a lot of them are obviously being set by people who are not as careful as they should be out holding events and conducting themselves in the outdoors. What are we doing to educate people to say, you got to be extremely careful in the summer in the woods, so that we don't have a reoccurrence of this every time somebody wants to have a function or have a fire out there to warm themselves? What are we? What kind of public education are we doing to try to prevent this?
That's a great question. Our fire prevention officials and our fire agencies do a fair amount of public education to try and prevent forest fires. I think it's a great comment, which is what we're seeing with these fires is, again, certain outdoor activities, even in more developed areas, urban interface areas that are causing these fires. Definitely there's great work that's done to prevent wildfires in terms of creating a defensible space around homes and that kind of thing. I'll admit I'm personally not an expert on sort of the fire prevention and those types of education activities, because that's typically within the realm of fire EMS agencies. But I know that they do work in order to try and prevent anything that might ignite a wildfire.
Commissioner Rogers, if I may respond to that one. I think that's a good point, and we will take that to our debrief and discuss how we can work with the fire district on these important messages for safety in the future, given the sheer impact that we are all seeing and feeling with these fires.
Absolutely.
Anything else, Commissioner Rogers? Oh, we'll move on then to Vice Chair Commissioner Scouten.
Thank you. What's the situation in Clackamas County? Sadly, that's where much of this in the regional area has hit us with respect to fire. And what's the story as far as evacuations from that area? And are we still in a position to help, or are we anticipating additional evacuations into our facilities in the coming days?
Yeah, the latest report is Clackamas County, for their active fires, they only had very moderate growth. Just 1% growth is the way it was described to me this morning. So fortunately, the weather has been very cooperative. Right now, we have much better humidity, and good news for fires, bad news for smoke. But the winds have also been very light as well, and so they did. I think it was Saturday or Sunday. They did open up some areas of Clackamas County. They lifted the level 1 evacuation areas, particularly along the border, Canby, Sandy, Oregon City. The level 1 evacuation orders were lifted in those areas. Most of the level 2 and level 3 orders are continuing in Clackamas County. We do not anticipate, and especially given the way wildfires are weather-driven, is there's nothing currently in the forecast that points to any substantial wildfire concerns. This time of year, our greatest concern is what happened, which was, an east wind event, where you have desiccating or drying east winds that come out and whip up fire activity. In general, the resource picture is also looking better, and that there's when these fires blew up, it obviously drew a lot of the resources into the area, and so there's many more resources available now to fight the fires in Clackamas County. So I think the prognosis and the forecast is good there, and at this point, we don't anticipate any additional, for instance, evacuations or other support needed for Clackamas County. I know that we are providing, I believe, the Sheriff's Office is providing a public information officer to them, and one of the things we may see is that kind of support to where some of their management staff, like in their EOC, need relief.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Scouten, if I may add to that too, we are very open to mutual aid requests, and we have made that known to Clackamas and other regional partners. And those requests typically funnel through some of our connections within departments, but commonly through John, through his EOC connections and partnership with other EOC managers. I do also want to lift up another request that from a mutual aid was for behavioral health support for Clackamas County employees. So our public health team is working with their team. And so we've made it well known that as needs emerge, to please just reach out to us, and we will be of assistance as we can.
All right, Commissioner Treese.
I have no questions. I just want to say thank you, John, for the communication, for the situation reports. It was very helpful to have those. So I appreciate it, and thank you for your good work.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Willie.
Yeah, just to echo Commissioner Treese's comments. Thanks very much for the update, John. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay, I'll add really hats off to all of the team members for their work, marshaling volunteers and really stepping up to address the needs, not only of our Washington County community, but also our associated community members. Yamhill County was the other partner with the Chehalem Ridge fire. I know that their appointed commission chair, they have a rotating basis for chair, Commissioner Kulia and I were in contact with one another. It's been quite an experience over this last set of 8 days, going from the tremendous winds that our community was experiencing to then these fires. You know, I remember it was just 1 week ago that during the course of our board meetings, our CAO did let us know about the power line fire that flared or that occurred. From the experience that I was watching unfold on Monday with account to the fires in Marion County and the movement of animals and the need to mobilize the fairgrounds, that's why I responded on Tuesday to our CAO to get our fairgrounds set up. And it's just been a phenomenal effort. And I really appreciate all the work that Leah Perkins Hagley and all of the others have put into that. Concerns that I had with regard to the grape harvest, Carolyn McCormick of the Tualatin Valley Visitors Association distributed KN95 masks to every winery in advance of the harvest, and then went through touching base with all of them again. And just concern for people. And our team members did everything that they could think of to offer support and really address people's needs. And I'm very grateful for that. We've really been tested. I have one question for you, John, and this is to prepare not only myself, but also potentially community members, and not just here in Washington County, but elsewhere, as we all love the great state of Oregon and tend to travel about. So we continue to have these dry conditions. You've put us on notice to be careful and mindful of the potential for east winds in the coming weeks.
In the burn areas in Washington County, obviously the Chehalem Mountain Bald Peak fire involves some rugged, steep terrain in that area, and so there may be some risk. So that's something we'll look at there as well. There is a system in place that was used for Eagle Creek and other fires where state officials will, state geologists will basically give out warning information when there is a risk of landslides in burn areas. And so that's a tool that's available to help us be prepared for that kind of eventuality. And so they'll do that each year when we have heavy rains. They'll actually get out sort of a warning product when there's a concern around landslides.
Thank you, John. And commissioners, as usual, we've got a great team. Please let our CAO know if you have other informational needs as we navigate these next few weeks. And thank you too for your outreach to our colleagues in other counties, particularly for Clackamas County. I know they have appreciated it. Anything else for this presentation, Ms. Angie?
There is not.
Okay, well then we'll move on to our next presentation. And this is a proclamation in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. We have 3 outside speakers who our board clerk, Mr. Moss, will be introducing. And then following that, we will have 2, I'm not sure why we have the public hearing displayed. Following that, we'll have 2 Washington County employees, Rosina Padilla Hurley and Nancy Mercado, read the proclamation for us. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Moss, so you can control all the whiz-bang presentation windows.
All right, speakers. Thank you, Madam Chair. So we have Maria with Centro, Serena Cruz with VGMHC, Petrona Dominguez, and Arciel Mendez of Alante Majuras to give the report for you. Maria, can you hear us?
I'm sorry, thank you so much. I was trying to get rid of some background I had on my Zoom. So thank you so much for the invitation to be here. Just wanted to share with you some information about what we've been going through at Centro Cultural. I was just thinking a little bit ago that I didn't realize that Centro Cultural is an essential organization, an essential worker organization until this happened in terms of the pandemic. So we did shut down for one week, but then we quickly had to open up because we did have folks coming to Centro. And so the first thing that we did is we realized that there was a segment of our population who was not going to be receiving the stimulus that the federal government was putting out for taxpayers. The folks that we're serving are taxpayers, but because of their immigration status, they're not eligible for the stimulus. So we raised some money to get some folks some money for rent and other needs, utilities, groceries, etc. We were able to raise $183,864, and we put those out to the community. We had 441 applications, and we're able to fund 281 of those. We do have a waiting list now, even though our funds have depleted, but we continue to ask for and bring in other donations, and hopefully we'll have some. The other thing that we have been doing quite actively during the pandemic is really focusing on our elder population. Even before the pandemic, they had a lot of need. We have about 120 registered clients who come regularly to Centro. They come and they have a meal once a day. We're open 5 days a week for them. And they have companionship and they eat and exercise and that kind of thing. Well, when the pandemic hit, then everything shut down and they became isolated in their homes. So we then decided to call them. And so every week they each get a phone call. It's trying to figure out if they have any needs and just to kind of be a reassurance and a companionship for them. So we did partner with Pacific University to serve some of our more fragile seniors and those who have mental health issues. Because of being isolated and not being able to see their families, they were really going through some hard times. So we have been able to work with the graduate psychology program, and they have a specific program on training psychologists to work with Latino population. So it's a really good fit, and they continue to call our seniors. We also are partnering with disabled, aging, and veteran services with the county, who were kind enough to give us a contract to really increase our services to those folks. So we've continued to work with them. We're actually working to try to get some iPads for some of the seniors to be able to communicate with each other and with staff. In terms of the telephone calls that we've made approximately 930 telephone calls since June, and seniors really seem to appreciate that. We just started 2 weeks ago to pick them up and take them out to Working Theory Farms here in Hillsborough, where they really enjoyed being out in the open and helping to harvest some of the vegetables. And then the winds came and the smoke. So we're back to being inside the house. So we hope to continue working with them there. The next project that we've been working on is a contract with Washington County Public Health to provide support and wraparound services to Latinos testing positive or who are ill or in quarantine because of being exposed to the virus. We have served 176 households since June 24th, and we continue to serve them once the 30-day time frame has elapsed. We continue to serve them with wraparound services, connecting them to other programs, some of our services, and other organizations. We also have been doing food distribution through the food bank, and in collaboration with Virginia Garcia, who has a weekly food bank out there. We have a weekly food bank that provides 250 boxes to labor camps. And we will continue that through the end of September as well. So I just have a couple more programs to just update you about. One of them is our summer STEAM program where we were able to serve 45 families, 56 students with a virtual summer camp. Normally, we have 100 kids on our campus every summer for 4 weeks, 6 hours a day doing STEM activities. Our team was able to work and create some curriculum, put it on a YouTube channel, and then prepare kits and for every one of the curriculums twice a week. So the parents would drive up and pick up the kits and take them to their student. After the student did the kit and prepared everything, they brought it back and then were given the one for the next lesson. So that happened for 4 weeks, and we were working with those 45 families. At the end of the 4 weeks, they asked if we could continue serving and working with them throughout the school year, which we didn't have funding for, but fortunately talked with the school district, and they are willing to fund that program to continue doing that year round this school year. So we're really proud of that, and we're really happy that we were able to continue with our summer program virtually. The last thing is, of course, people continue to need jobs during the pandemic. We've served 1,805 clients through June 30th out of our Prosperidad office in Hillsborough. We do serve the entire county out of the Hillsborough office. Our initial funding was from the city, but we were able to leverage that and get money to serve the entire county. So we're really happy about being able to do that. We have continued our GED classes online. We have about 34 students who are ready to graduate in November, which is when we have our graduation every year. And then we also operated a statewide unemployment hotline for the employment service to, help folks with applications and answer questions for Spanish speakers. And so that's my report about what we've been doing at Centro Cultural. We're out there, we're busy as ever, and want to thank you for your support as a county, and to tell you how impressed I am at your leadership in terms of just sitting here for the past hour and listening to everything that was said. I'm really impressed and proud. So thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I can tell from the expressions from the different commissioners that we're really proud to have the opportunity to partner with Centro Cultural in order to ensure that the needs of our community members are being met as well as we are able.
Thank you,
Kevin, who will we be hearing from next?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So next we will have the proclamation read in English and then in Spanish. So we have Rose.
No, I think we still have a presentation from Serena Cruz from Virginia Garcia Memorial Health Foundation, and then from Adelante Mejeres.
You are correct, Madam Chair. Please go ahead, Serena.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. I'm Serena Cruz, the Executive Director of the Virginia Garcia Memorial Foundation. On behalf of Gil Munoz, the Health Center CEO, and our over 600 employees, we thank you for recognizing National Hispanic Heritage Month and for inviting us to join you in this celebration. These are dark times, and it's hard not to feel that pretty heavily after your briefing, as Maria shared. It's really hard to get our heads around celebration and recognition, but this is exactly the time when we need to highlight those bright spots that help us get through. So this year's theme for Hispanic Heritage Month is Be Proud of the Past and Embrace the Future. It really speaks truth to Virginia Garcia's founding story 45 years ago, our growth, innovation, and transformation to serve the community regardless of our challenges, obstacles, and barriers in our path. Today, we commemorate with you the incredible diversity of cultures and experiences in this community that our ancestors represent and the people from many parts of the world who are Hispanic and Latinx. Today, we honor their contributions to our society and recognize it is their shoulders that we stand on as giants who have paved the way for us, and that they continue to fuel our resilience and our desire to thrive. At Virginia Garcia, we are attempting to stand tall on the shoulders of our founders, families like the Garzas, Margaret Garza, who is a key leader at Washington County, Those founders left a legacy for us, and we are trying hard to stand on those shoulders. The pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement, the fires, they all speak directly to the structural racism that the communities we serve face. With Washington County's strong support for our work, we grew our mobile outreach program from 18 events to 25 events this year, taking healthcare directly to our community where they live and work, in the fields, in camps, in communities where people in apartment complexes all throughout. The consequences of this pandemic are landing heavier in the Latinx community. Washington County's positivity rate is 3.32%. And of that group, Latinx community members make up 52% of the positive test results in Washington County, but only 15% of the population. I just want you to sit with that for a minute, because even though that number looks so small in terms of the positivity, it really is overwhelmingly landing in the Latinx community in Washington County. And at Virginia Garcia, we have a really high positivity rate. We're at 10.98% of all of the tests, all of the screens that we take come back positive. And Latinx community members make up 82% of our positivity rate. So it gives you a sense of how we are able to capture and connect to and serve some of the most vulnerable folks in this community, as reflecting in that data. In just a moment, for statewide data, Latinx community members make up 13% of the state's population, but only 40% of the cases throughout this, but not only, but 40%. Sometimes I need to step back. But 40% of the cases throughout the state. So what we're seeing in Washington County is what we're seeing statewide, and it reflects these structural pieces of racism throughout our society and in our community. But in spite of these challenges, we want you to know that the communities we serve have found numerous ways to come together. You just listen to Maria and you hear all of those amazing ways that we come together to thrive and to be resilient. That's our power and strength as a community. So today we ask you to stand with us, to be a part of Together We Are Virginia Garcia. What that phrase means and what it stands for is our ask for you to join us in affecting policy changes that help pave the way for eliminating health inequities and disparities in our community. We want to continue to leverage these platforms throughout our community. We ask you to continue to invest in the community, and that we will fuel innovation to continue to overcome barriers to care and wellness that have been magnified by COVID-19, the wildfires, and the vulnerable communities that we serve. We thank you for your support and your partnership, and that you have demonstrated, and we ask you to stand with us on the shoulders of our ancestors to act. Together, we are Virginia Garcia.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. And Kevin, if you could help me greet our next two speakers, Patrona Dominguez and Araceli Mendez from Adelante Mujeres.
Yes, Madam Chair. Patrona and Arcel, please give us your presentation.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for inviting us, Adelante Mujeres and Patrona and I, to this meeting. It was a lot of great information listening to all of you, and I'm just glad I was able to be part of this. A little bit about what Adelante Mujeres has been doing during this time. I have, if you're aware, Adelante Mujeres is kind of split up into two main departments. So it's the education department and the microenterprise department. And so I'll be speaking a little bit about what the education department has been doing, and then Patrona will speak on the microenterprise and our solidarity projects that we've been working on. So as far as education, we were very fortunate to be able to switch pretty early to online sessions. So our adult education programming, our Beyond Trauma programming, and our Chicas programming, we switched online sessions, classes right away. Again, we were very fortunate to be able to do that. I know a lot of programs had to take a little bit of time. So we jumped right in and we were able to keep serving and kind of as seamlessly as possible continue our programming. But we kind of threw all those out of the curriculum out the window and really focused on what our participants and families needed. As far as food deliveries, whether it was mental health resources, rent assistance, things like that, and really checking in with our families to make sure that we were serving them the way they needed to be served and not us imposing whatever we felt like they needed. So we really focused on, especially for the younger students, on their mental health, because we know that they had to stay home for longer periods of time, some of them by themselves, some of them taking care of themselves and other siblings. And so we really focused on making sure that they were all okay, making sure that they felt safe, that they felt uh, supported by us. And as far as adult education programming, again, everything moved online. So we really just focused on making sure that the moms, the students felt like they could come to us and ask for food if they needed it, ask for supplies, ask for materials. And again, we were very fortunate to be able to deliver the things that they needed for people who weren't able to leave their homes, who were most vulnerable during that time. And still to this day, we still partner with school district pantries, food pantries, and we have some staff members who pack boxes and deliver to families who don't have transportation or just can't leave the house at this time. So we're really, again, focusing really on what the families need and making sure that we're providing the best services that we can. A couple months ago, our early childhood classrooms were able to open up following all the health and safety guidelines. So we're very fortunate because parents were able to go back to work and leave their kids in a safe space in the Adelante Mujeres building. So we were very grateful to be able to do that, and also bringing in our staff, our teachers, who also need a job as well. So yeah, again, so we've been partnering with school districts as much as possible and just providing what we need, what the families need. For the we were also able to have a virtual camp as well during the summer, and we collected all the supplies that we need and delivered to, I want to say, about 100 students. We delivered all their supplies so that they were able to participate virtually and not have to worry about going out and buying all those supplies on their own. So we're very grateful that we were able to do that. And so that's kind of what we've been doing in the education section of Adelante Mujeres. And I'll let Petrona now speak on the micro enterprise part. Thank you.
Thank you, Araceli. And yeah, thank you so much to each and every one of you for being here. I know it's been very difficult, especially with the fires. And just recently, a lot of our community members have been saying, they have headaches going on because of the fires and just, having to deal with that amongst everything else. And so, yeah, it's been very tough. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about our enterprise program. So enterprise has a lot of different programs within them, and I'll just kind of highlight a few things from each one. Just so you all get a little bit of a spec of what we've been doing. So we know that COVID has been impacting us all, and especially the communities that we work with. So after hearing participants and talking to them on the phone and continuously getting text messages from them, what we have been identifying at Adelante Mujeres has kind of been the thing to refocus our energy on what they need versus looking at the numbers wise. So here we have, we've been giving access to food vouchers, giving food access to individuals to go to the Forest Grove Farmer Markets by getting the food vouchers so that they can get access to local organic food products. Thankfully, our team here at Adelante has been working tremendously hard in readjusting how the Forest Grove Farmers Market and the Cornelius Farmers Market will look like, so that consumers also can go into the community and get their items. We've been also providing support to farm business owners to get their crops sold. We know that this time has been very difficult for them, especially, and so we're thankful that we've been able to readjust that to make sure that they have access to that. We are also acting as one of the 4 business recovery centers here in Washington County, where we have been able to provide amazing support to business owners to get access to personal protection equipment and also to support to open grants that are available. And with that, we also have our Empresas team, which focuses on small businesses, where they have been able to mentor specifically local Latinx businesses to support them with also getting personal protection equipment, but also just readjusting on how to, work around a new business during this time, but also finding suitable grants for them that they're able to access to. And then lastly, our leadership and advocacy team has been supporting in a lot of different ways, from immigration related to just, COVID related. And so one of the programs that we have been able to participate is being one of the 20 organizations to support families in applying for the Oregon Worker Relief Fund and the Quarantine Fund, which basically provides financial support directly to Oregonians who have lost their wage or who have been exposed to COVID and yet are ineligible for unemployment based on just, not being able to receive the federal stimulus check or because of their immigration status. And so we've been able to be one of those navigating agencies, and that has been tremendous because we have been able to support at least over 500 families, and which kind of total out to at least more than $600,000. So it's been really great to know that we have been part of that agents. And lastly, something that always pops up is with immigration, we're always continuing to work around that and making sure that we are focusing our energy on families who are being affected outside of just COVID, but also, amongst other things. And so we know right now, just recently yesterday, they came out with that TPS will be suspended for a various amount of countries. And so that is going to be our next energy rate to focus on what is currently happening and just trying to readjust also and targeting those families. But yeah, that's kind of a gist of what we have been doing here at Adelante Mujeres. And like Serena and from Centro Cultural, we're really just trying to focus our energy with participants. And I'm so thankful that we have such amazing organizations and have amazing commissioners to support us. And we thank you all so much for allowing us to share a little bit about what we've been doing here.
Well, thank you to the 4 of you, and I hope you will hang on with us for a little bit longer while we have 2 wonderful staff members, Rosina Padilla Hurley and Nancy Mercado, read the proclamation for us. And then after that, we'll open the floor up to commissioners for all their questions or comments, and then we'll move to adopt the proclamation.
Perfect. Go ahead, Nancy.
Proclamation. Board of Commissioners for Washington County. A proclamation in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month.
Proclamación. Junta de Comisionados para el Condado de Washington. Una proclamación en honor de Mes de la Herencia Hispana.
Whereas each year, the United States observes National Hispanic Heritage Month by celebrating the culture, heritage, and countless contributions of those whose ancestors were indigenous to North America, as well as those who came from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, Central America, and South America, and
Por cuanto, cada año los Estados Unidos observa el Mes Nacional de la Herencia Hispana al celebrar la cultura, el patrimonio y las innumerables contribuciones de aquellos cuyos antepasados eran indígenas de América del Norte, así como de aquellos que vinieron de España, México, el Caribe, América Central y América del Sur, y
whereas what began in 1968 as Hispanic Heritage Week under President Johnson was expanded by President Reagan in 1988 to cover a 30-day period starting on September 15th and ending on October 15th, and
por cuanto lo que comenzó en 1968 como la Semana de la Herencia Hispana bajo el presidente Johnson y fue expandido por el presidente Reagan en 1988 para cubrir un periodo de 30 días, que comienza el 15 de septiembre y termina el 15 de octubre, y
whereas the date September 15 is significant because it is the anniversary of independence for the Latin American countries of Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Additionally, Mexico and Chile celebrate their Independence Day on September 16th and September 18th, respectively. And
Por cuanto que la fecha del 15 de septiembre es significativa, porque es el aniversario de la independencia de los países latinoamericanos, de Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras y Nicaragua. Además, México y Chile celebran sus días de independencia el 16 y el 18 de septiembre respectivamente. Y
whereas this year's theme, Hispanics, be proud of your past, embrace the future, encourage us to reflect on the legacy of Latinx people who have influenced our nation's history and serve today as leaders in all aspects of our national life, from the Supreme Court and House of Congress to boardrooms and main streets across all the United States. And
por cuanto que el tema de este año, hispanos, siéntanse orgullosos de su pasado y abracen su futuro, nos anima a reflexionar sobre el legado de las personas latinas que han influenciado en la historia de nuestra nación y ejercen hoy como líderes en todos los aspectos de nuestra vida nacional, desde la Corte Suprema y los pasillos del Congreso hasta las salas y juntas y calles principales de todos los Estados Unidos. Y
whereas we recognize and honor the many ways that Hispanics have enriched the fabric of our society, while also rededicating ourselves to address the lack of equal access to opportunity that many still face. And
por cuanto que reconocemos y honramos las muchas formas en que los hispanos han enriquecido la estructura de nuestra sociedad y al mismo tiempo nos dedicamos nuevamente a abordar la falta de igualdad de acceso a las oportunidades que muchos todavía enfrentan. Y
whereas the Hispanic population of the United States is now over 60 million, constituting approximately 18.5% of our total population, and representing a wide range of nationalities and backgrounds, which reflect the remarkable diversity of the American people. And
por cuanto que la población hispana de los Estados Unidos ahora supera los 60 millones, lo que constituye aproximadamente el 18.5% de nuestra población total y representa una amplia gama de nacionalidades y orígenes que reflejan la notable diversidad del pueblo estadounidense. Y
whereas Hispanics continue their rich tradition of significant and diverse contributions to the cultural, educational, economic, and political vitality of Washington County.
Por cuanto que los hispanos continúan su rica tradición de contribuciones significativas y diversas a la vitalidad cultural, educativa, económica y política del condado de Washington.
Now, therefore, be it resolved that on this 15th day of September 2020, the Washington County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim September 15th through October 15th, 2020 as Hispanic Heritage Month and encourage all residents to celebrate our unique and vibrant history and recommit ourselves to a shared future of healthy, peaceful, safe, and sustainable communities for all.
Ahora, por lo tanto, se resuelve que en este día, 15 de septiembre del 2020, la Junta de Comisionados del Condado de Washington proclama por la presente el 15 de septiembre al 15 de octubre como el mes de la herencia hispana y alienta a todos los residentes a celebrar nuestra historia única y vibrante y volver a comprometernos nosotros mismos hacia un futuro compartido de comunidades saludables, pacíficas, seguras y sustentables para todos. Gracias.
Thank you for reading the proclamation. Why don't we get a motion on the table and then turn it over to commissioner comments?
Chair Harrington, I move to accept the proclamation.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Rogers, any questions or comments?
Oh, it's delightful to see so many nice faces and to hear the comments both in English and Spanish. This isn't unique. We've done this for several years because we value participation and we value everyone being involved. So thank you for taking the burden off of us of trying to read that in English and Spanish. We would have struggled. So I appreciate it very much.
Commissioner Scouten.
I'm just thinking of one of our national mottos, E pluribus unum in Latin, which is the mother tongue of Spanish, among other languages, and having respect and love for everyone that's all part of this great country. That couldn't be more American and truly will make America great again.
Commissioner Treese.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to take just a moment and say how important this proclamation is to me and to our commission. While I recognize this is not a new process, it's a renewal of our commitment. And I think that that's a very important piece to what we're doing here. I also think that within the last several months, my eyes have been truly opened. I have the privilege to serve on the board of Centro Cultural, and I've been able to watch the impact that Centro has in our community. Very familiar with Virginia Garcia and with Adelante Mujeres. But for me, the key has been, as we've faced things like the distribution of our CARES funding, we have reached out to these groups and been able to coordinate with you in relationship to providing the services necessary to our Hispanic and Latinx community. So that partnership to me is really, really valuable. And I appreciate all that you do in reaching out to the community and providing us with the pathways to get there as well through our listening sessions, through everything. So thank you for what you do. And we will get through this difficult time together and maintain our relationships. So thank you to each of you. And I'm proud to support this.
Commissioner Willie.
Yes, I guess following Commissioner Teresa is not a very fair thing, so I want the reverse upside down alphabet then if we're going to do that. All the things that Pam said, I completely agree with, and I certainly appreciate the update that we got from each one of you regarding your organizations that you represent. And especially a shout out to Adelante for being a part of our business recovery centers. You're doing a great job out there, and keep up the good work. That's exactly what we needed in Western Washington County in that area. So thank you for doing all of that. And I agree with this proclamation. Really happy to endorse this and certainly have it read publicly during our board meeting. So thank you.
Well, I'd like to finish up by thanking you, Ms. Mercado and Ms. Padilla-Hurley, for reading the proclamation for us, and also to the four of you, Maria Caballero Rubio, Serena Cruz, Araceli Mendez, and Patrona Dominguez, for joining us today to highlight the work that you do, not only for our community members here in Washington County, but you provide services to our community members all throughout the great state of Oregon. I love the theme for this year. I like all of them, true, but particularly this one, to encourage folks, be proud of your heritage, be proud because you are members, valued members of our community. We are a community together. You are important to us. We are not a community without you. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second to adopt today's proclamation. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you very much.
Okay, Madam Chair, if I may, I was going to have our wonderful IT staff display the proclamation on the screen so commissioners, you can get a photo of you with the approval of this proclamation. So our IT staff will get a photo of it and I will as well. Thank you very much, commissioners.
Well, that was a first. Usually we're together in a room, not today. So thank you for that virtual commemoration. Next, we'll move on to, thank you again for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And please do stay healthy.
One note, Madam Chair, as we move to the public hearings, we got a request from Stephen Roberts of LUT to swap the order of 869 and 868. So 5B would be swapped with 5C and 5D due to the larger public comment on 5B, the ordinance 869.
Okay, thank you. All right, next we'll move on to public hearings. We have 3 of them today. The first one is to approve a resolution and order to adopt the Washington County supplemental budget for fiscal year 2020 through 2021, also known as FY21. I'd like to turn it over to Jack Leong for a staff report.
Hi, good morning, Chair Harrington. Good morning, commissioners. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, thank you. For the record, my name is Jack Leong, Director of Support Services, Chief Financial Officer. I am presenting to you to approve a resolution in order to adopt Washington County supplemental budget for fiscal year 2021. Now, I'd like to note that this is a off-scheduled supplemental budget that is not our ordinary fall budget adjustment or spring budget adjustment. It is actually a special one that we put in place specifically for a new program that is being set up in relation to the Supportive Housing Services Revenue Fund. And this supplemental budget includes 3 action items. The first one is to establish a new fund. The fund is called Fund 221, Supportive Housing Services Revenue Fund. The purpose of this new fund is to segregate revenues and expenditures related with the county supportive housing program. And the funding source for this particular fund will be from the Metro Supportive Housing Services measure approved by the voters in May 2020. And to go with that, we also, because the revenue may come in a little bit later, and actually it's anticipated for the revenue to come in the spring of 2021. And there are actually planning work and preparation work that needs to happen as soon as possible. So we're actually providing a general fund short-term loan to this fund to fund the short-term cash flow need for the expenditures. So along with this supplemental budget, we're increasing the expenditure for general fund for $350,000 to provide a loan to Fund 221, and decreasing the general fund contingency for the same amount. At the same time, we're also providing appropriations in this new fund for both revenue and expenditure. The revenue will be the general fund transfer, and the expenditure will be the associated expenditure that's needed for supportive housing activities to conduct the work. And that's the 3 items included in this supplemental budget. It is also provided in detail in Exhibit A that's attached with the agenda item. And that is the end of my staff report. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
So first I'll check with board questions. Commissioner Rogers, did you have a question?
No, I don't think so, Jack. Again, the only reason to do this is that you've exceeded your 10% limitation. So I mean, you've got to do it under Oregon law. So I don't.
Correct.
Are there any other commissioner questions or comments at this time? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to open a public hearing. Mr. Moss, has anyone signed up to speak during this public hearing?
No, Madam Chair, we have no one signed up for this public hearing.
And anyone there in the room, just in case?
There's no one in the auditorium. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll close today's public hearing and ask the commission for a motion to approve the resolution in order to adopt the supplemental budget for fiscal year 2020-2021.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you, commissioners. Next, by request from our staff, thank you, Jack. We'll move to the public hearing for item C. to consider a proposed ordinance 868. But first, we need a motion to read the ordinance by title only.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Ms. Sato, could you please read this ordinance by title only?
Of course, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful, thank you. So before the board this morning right now, it is ordinance 868, an ordinance relating to the adoption of amended and restated development agreement between Washington County, Oregon and Beaverton LLC.
Thank you. Is there a staff report on this ordinance today?
All right, give me a second, Madam Chair, as I bring over our people. Right, Mr. Roberts, can you go ahead while I bring the rest of the people over for you?
I can. Everybody hear me okay? Great. Well, good morning. I just want to really turn it over to Suzanne Savin. She's going to run us through, I think, hopefully a pretty brief version of the presentation on Ordinance 868 today, our updated development agreement with Tektronix or Beaverton LLC. And we'll be available to answer questions afterward if you have any.
Suzanne, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Great. All right. So Suzanne Savin, Senior Planner with Long Range Planning to provide this staff report for the updated development agreement between Washington County and Tektronix, a wholly owned subsidiary of Beaverton LLC. Next slide, please. So this is the location of the campus at the southeast corner of Murray Boulevard and Jenkins Road. And Tektronix designs and manufactures testing and measurement equipment for fields such as computing, communications, and automotive. And Tektronix started the tech industry in Washington County and sited their campus here in 1959. The campus is about 139 acres and contains several existing buildings, and the development agreement addresses the development in this campus area. Next slide, please. And this map shows that the campus consists of 2 lots, lots 1 and 14, and 3 tracks, and lots 2 and 3 that are shown here were sold to Nike. Next slide, please. So as background, Tektronix and the county entered into a development agreement in the late 1990s to facilitate subdivision and development of the Tektronix campus and provide certainty for the county and Tektronix about the permitted uses, allowable densities and building heights, and responsibilities for timely completion of required transportation improvements. Next slide, please. So the campus has an industrial district land use designation, and the allowed uses in that district include manufacturing, processing, and wholesale commercial uses. The development agreement also allows the campus to have transit-oriented employment district uses, which include professional offices, research and development, and service and retail businesses. Next slide. State law provides for development agreements, but limits the maximum duration with the county to 7 years. And state law requires development agreements to be adopted or amended by ordinance. Next slide. So this ordinance updates the development agreement to amend the right-of-way requirements consistent with current road standards, add the Beaverton Creek Regional Trail to the list of public improvements in the development agreement, update the campus building square footage and clarify applicable development standards, and extend the term of the agreement for 7 years. Next slide. So the agreement is divided into several sections, and the majority of these are not proposed to be changed or have only minor changes. Sections 1 through 7 of the agreement contain its substantive components, and of these, Two of them are proposed to be amended. One of them is the Section 3 Permitted Uses Invested Code, and the other is Section 6 Infrastructure Improvements and Dedications. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in the next few slides. Next slide. So the public improvements have been amended to add some requirements that apply to Jenkins Road, which runs along the north edge of the campus, and Terman Road, which runs along the south edge of the campus, and Shannon Place, which runs north-south between Terman Road and the Milliken Way Light Rail Station. Next slide. So the transportation amendments involve requiring additional right-of-way for Jenkins Road. This road is an arterial, and it was changed from 3 lanes to 5 lanes as part of a 2014 transportation system plan update. In addition, additional right-of-way is required for Terman Road and Shannon Place, which are both collectors, and that additional right-of-way is needed for pedestrian and bicycle improvements. The Beaverton Creek Regional Trail has been added as one of the transportation improvements in the development agreement, and the parties agree to work with Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District to locate the trail. The trail alignment is currently under study. Next slide. So other updates include updating the inventory of building square footage to be consistent with a Tektronix assessment of building square footage that was conducted in 2018, and clarifying the applicability of certain 1998 Community Development Code standards related to uses and building massing in areas, and extending the agreement's term by 7 years from its effective date. Next slide. So on August 19th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on this ordinance, and the testimony consisted of Tektronix testifying in favor of the ordinance. The Planning Commission deliberated, and their deliberations included some questions around the nature of the agreement. And at the conclusion of deliberations, the Planning Commission unanimously recommended that Ordinance 868 be adopted as filed. Next slide. So staff recommends that the board conduct the public hearing, and after the hearing, adopt Ordinance 868, and in a separate motion, adopt the associated findings. And this concludes staff's report. Ready for any questions.
So I'd like to note that we did have an extensive work session presentation and discussion last week on this matter for the Board of Commissioners. But at this time, are there any remaining board questions or comments before we open a public hearing? Seeing and hearing none, I'd like to open a public hearing on ordinance number 868. Mr. Moss, do we have anyone signed up?
Yes, we do, Madam Chair. Dana Kralzak, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can. You have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is Dana Krafchuk from Stoll Reeves. I'm here on behalf of Tektronix and Beaverton LLC. We enthusiastically support Ordinance 868 and the amended development agreement, and urge the Board of County Commissioners to adopt it this afternoon. First and foremost, we appreciate the ongoing collaboration with DLET staff over the past 2 years, particularly Suzanne Savin and Steve Kelly. We support the development agreement because it helps Tektronix maintain its functionality on its campus while it continues to evaluate potential redevelopment opportunities. We've submitted a letter in support that outlines in detail the reasons that we support the development agreement, but essentially it provides potential redevelopment partners certainty going forward. It reinforces the long-standing strong relationship that Tektronix and Washington County have had, and it gives us certainty as we continue in these very uncertain times. The staff report covered the substance of the development agreement, so I won't repeat that. I just wanted to be here to express our support and be available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I did want to note for the record that we did receive your letter and it is part of our public record. Mr. Moss, anyone else signed up during this public hearing?
We do not have anyone else, Madam Chair.
Okay, seeing none, I'll close today's public hearing. What are the wishes of the commission?
I
with
would move
regard
we,
to this?
I would move that we, for the requested action, that we grant the request.
I second.
Wonderful. Roll call, please, Mr. Moss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Willie.
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers.
Aye.
Commissioner Treese.
Aye.
Commissioner Skoughton.
Aye.
Chair Harrington.
Yes. The ordinance passes 5-0. Next, we'll move on to adopt the findings for ordinance 868. Do we have a staff report?
So moved, Madam Chair. We've all seen them.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the findings of ordinance number 868 and authorize the chair to sign the resolution and order memorializing the action. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Next, we'll move back to item B, 5B, and that is ordinance number 869, an ordinance amending the Community Development Code relating to development in areas designated significant natural resources and planned developments. First, we need a motion to read the ordinance by title only.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Ms. Sato, could you please read the ordinance by title only?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Ordinance 869, an ordinance amending the Community Development Code relating to development in areas designated significant natural resources and planned developments.
Thank you. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll run through a staff report. I did want to just make a few sort of introductory remarks, if I could, before we get into that. I just want to acknowledge up front that this is a very complex topic, and both our staff and you all have spent a number of hours working on this topic already. There are a number of policy issues that are being discussed that are, I think, important ones, but many of them are beyond the scope of this particular ordinance. So I just wanted to sort of set that context up front. The scope of this ordinance, as we were directed by the board, is really to address the standards that were identified as not being clear and objective, and that will then help us hopefully to move forward with lifting an injunction that's been imposed on the county by the Department of Land Conservation and Development Commission. And so we understand that there are larger policy issues that people are interested in discussing. And we would just simply point out that the board obviously has the ability to direct us to do additional work on some of those policy issues in future work programs. And so I'm sure that will be an ongoing topic of discussion. So with all of that said, I know there's concern about community input and feedback, and we certainly want to get more input and feedback on some of those larger policy implications. We've been doing, I think, the best that we can given the limited amount of time and all of the other constraints that we're working under here with the pandemic and just needing to move very quickly on getting the ordinance crafted and ready to go. So I think that's really it. I would just kind of reiterate that the ordinance that's before you certainly is a draft. We already know that we're going to be coming back to you in 2 weeks with some recommendations for modifications to the ordinance, many of which have been based on comments that we have received from the public, some of them based on our own additional review. And so we know that we have some work to do there. And we certainly appreciate our Planning Commission. They've had 2 hearings on this ordinance so far. They'll be holding a 3rd hearing tomorrow night. And we're hoping at that meeting that they'll be prepared to forward you a recommendation, and we'll present that information to you in a staff report ahead of your September 29th meeting. The September 29th meeting will be important because that's the meeting where we'll actually be asking the board for direction to engross the ordinance to make those changes. And we'll provide you with some draft language ahead of that meeting on the 29th to help get your feedback on that. And I think with that, I'll go ahead and just turn it over. Michelle Miller is going to do the presentation. Andy Back and Teresa Cherniak are available with me to help answer questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. My name is Michelle Miller, Senior Planner in Land Use and Transportation. We're here for our first hearing on Ordinance Number 869, Amendments to the Significant Natural Resource Regulations. As Stephen went over, we're recommending holding today's hearing to take testimony and then continuing it to September 29th for future consideration. Next slide. So today's presentation will include, first for context, brief background on statewide planning goal and the county's inventory and process to comply with this goal, changes to state law, land use cases related to these regulations, and the enforcement order. Then we'll go over the details of the ordinance and briefly discuss the status of the Planning Commission hearings and comments we've received to date. Finally, a timeline of next steps. Next slide, please. Statewide planning goal covers over a dozen different types of resources ranging from wildlife habitat to historic and cultural resources. Under statewide planning goals that implement Goal 5, a local jurisdiction develops its Goal 5 program by following a process. The county completed its initial inventory and process in 1983 and again in 2005 with the Tualatin Basin program. Now we're revising our adopted regulations consistent with our existing policy decisions made at that time. State law changed in 2017 through Senate Bill 1051. It was a housing-related bill that addressed barriers to residential land development. One of these legislative changes required that local jurisdictions must be required to have clear and objective standards for urban and residential land use development projects. In 2018, our county hearing officer approved a 6-lot subdivision with identified significant natural resources known as the Crestline decision. The hearing officer applied the state law changes and determined that 3 of our criteria were not clear and objective and therefore could not be applied to the Crestline development. Nearby neighbors appealed the hearing officer decision and the LUBA and Court of Appeals agreed with the county's hearings officer. As issues and community concerns continued and the Crestline case was appealed, on board direction, staff initiated an in-depth review of our Goal 5 program to provide recommendations to improve the development review process and advise on regulations. The final report, issued May 2020, included a public engagement report, options, and staff recommendations. The board provided direction on the recommendations and guided this ordinance development. Next slide, please. Over this past winter, a petition was filed with the Land Conservation and Development Commission to require the county to take corrective action to amend its natural resource provisions that were not clear and objective and not allow approvals of residential development applications on lands with significant natural resources until these standards were adopted. LCDC determined that the county was out of compliance with statewide planning goal because these provisions couldn't be enforced and established a deadline of May of next year to make changes. They agreed that an injunction was needed to restrict development applications on land with wildlife habitat. Could I have the next slide, please? Sorry, thank you. The enforcement order was issued June 1st and is in effect until the CDC is amended to address the significant natural resource standards deemed subjective. Next slide. Now turning to the ordinance. The primary objectives are to maintain consistency with our current Goal 5 policy direction outlined in the Comprehensive Plan and the Tualatin Basin Program. Address the enforcement order by developing clear and objective code language, especially as it applies to urban residential land use development, and provide clarity and transparency in the regulatory requirements. We're not adding new requirements to this section, but codifying the application processes and clarifying the standards in the natural resource chapter under development review. Next slide. Most of these changes only apply to urban residential land development sites with significant natural resources, which are identified in the community plans and the Rural Natural Resource Plan. The proposed amendments help to clarify the submittal materials and standardize the information needed to review a development application when a site does contain a significant natural resource. Within the water-related natural resource areas, we're keeping the same list of limited activities that are allowed and providing some clarification. For upland wildlife habitat, we did not have a minimum percentage of area of habitat protection, but a general requirement to provide on-site mitigation. So within upland wildlife habitat areas or areas directly adjacent to clean water services boundary areas, we're requiring a percentage of habitat area to be preserved if the development is within an urban area. Next slide. Turning to the details of the submittal requirements, applicants had relied on a 1998 director's interpretation that guided the process, but it hadn't been incorporated into the code. So we're proposing to codify those requirements for applications by requiring an on-site field verification, which identify and describe the limits of the mapped natural resource, a tree inventory, and a habitat assessment that describes the size, extent, and condition of the water-related and upland wildlife habitat. And within those field verified areas, certain limitations apply. Next slide. For water areas and wetlands and water-related fish and wildlife habitat, there is a very limited list of allowed uses and activities. We're not expanding on these allowed uses and activities, but where necessary, we clarify that these uses are subject to the requirements of Clean Water Services, the Department of State Lands, and the Army Corps of Engineers. Next slide. Turning to the current subjective standard related to habitat mitigation. The 2005 Tualatin Basin decision only requires voluntary measures for upland wildlife habitat, but the county had a previous standard in place, which required mitigation if a development seriously interfered with a habitat value, which was not clear and objective. Recognizing that the intent was not to preserve all of the upland wildlife habitat, but to quantify some percentage as lightly limiting development on sites that do have habitat. Next slide. So the proposed change requires a minimum protection area of upland wildlife habitat, and those riparian areas that fall outside the resource areas already subject to Clean Water Services review to be preserved at 25% of the field verified area anywhere on the site, or that applicants can protect 15% of the area when it is preserved adjacent to a riparian or Clean Water Services vegetated corridor. It seeks to provide an incentive and encourage a more connected habitat with this reduced amount. The preservation area must be enhanced to good condition by removing invasive species and replanting with natives as needed, and it permanently is preserved in a tract or an easement. Next slide. So in summary, we're looking to clarify the land use submittal process with minor changes to the categories and codifying our process and submittal requirements. We're keeping the existing narrow limited allowed uses and activities in the water-related habitat area. And for upland wildlife habitat, we are quantifying the preservation area requirements to replace an existing subjective mitigation language. We're adding a voluntary option to balance the objective criteria with a change to allow the wildlife habitat preservation area to count at 100% of the planned development open space requirements and offer minimal changes to the rural significant natural resource standards. Next slide. The Planning Commission has held 2 hearings with significant discussion, including possible work program tasks for next year. They have an interest in reviewing the staff's proposed changes prior to making a recommendation, and we have a hearing scheduled for tomorrow, September 16th, for further discussion. Next slide. So far, there's been a lot of interest in this ordinance, and we've received some valuable feedback and testimony, including additional testimony you received this morning. There's a wide range of comments with some requests for specific changes that include protecting 100% of the resource area rather than a certain percentage of habitat preservation area. Some address other subjective provisions and wording, and request to make the replanting requirements more clear. Some think an objective reviewer is needed for habitat assessments, and other technical questions or minor changes were requested. Next slide. Many concerns, however, are outside the scope of this ordinance. They address broader policy questions that go beyond what the board has asked us to correct with this ordinance by addressing the enforcement order. Staff suggests these listed items not be included as part of this ordinance development, but should be considered and evaluated as part of next year's long-range planning work program. Next slide. We will be asking for an engrossment of this ordinance, and we recommend that the board open the public hearing and accept testimony, and recommend continuing the hearing to September 29th, where we expect to present recommended engrossment language to be filed. And if approved, those hearings will be scheduled for October 20th and the 27th. And that completes my presentation. Take questions and open it up for public hearing at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Miller, for that extensive staff report. And I want to say I really appreciate the diligence of our staff, but also from the Planning Commission for entertaining all of the aspects of this topic and all of the public involvement that has gone into this. First, are there any questions from commission members on the staff report?
Not at this time.
Okay, Commissioner
No, thank you.
Rogers?
I don't think there's any questions. I appreciate the presentation. This is complex, and I still think we're trying to thread the needle. I mean, there's a lot of definition. I certainly wish the Planning Commission had a meeting a little earlier, like this past week, or we had this the following week or something. But I understand it's a complex issue.
Commissioner Willie, did you have anything?
I did not.
Okay. All righty. Before I open the public hearing, I do want to note that we received 2 sets of public input in advance of today's public hearing. The set from yesterday, there were 5 different emails, and then we got another set this morning that had 13 different emails and letters in it. So I just wanted to make note of that for the record. So I'm going to proceed in opening a public hearing on Ordinance 869. Mr. Moss, how many people do we have signed up to testify today?
We have 7, Madam Chair. 6 I see are online, and I don't see the 7th, so at least 6 so far.
Okay. I do want to note for everyone who's wanting to testify today that we have received input, written input. Commissioners have taken a look at that, and planning commissioners are also very diligent in looking at all of the written testimony as well. But I'll now turn it over to Mr. Moss. Oh yes, Commissioner Schouten was just holding up the draft documents that we've received from our staff for the significant natural resources work. So Mr. Moss, I'll turn it over to you to call on different individuals.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. First up, we have Ona Galanka. Ona, can you hear us?
Hi, yeah, it's Ona Galanka.
Oh, my apologies.
No
You
worries.
have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thanks. I'm testifying as a longtime resident of Washington County. I've lived in Beaverton for 30 years. And I really value the wildlife habitat that is incorporated and in unincorporated Washington County. But I think that the ordinance needs more revision from its current state. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. I haven't really testified ever at a public hearing before. I think that language such as more stringent or generally or serious interference, if it's left at its current state, is left interpretation, which would provide ample opportunity for loopholes or for people acting in good faith versus working in regards to objective measures. I think that this year especially has made us realize the importance of protecting wildlife habitat, everything from the pandemic to these recent wildfires. I think that objective field inspectors or field verificators are needed. Perhaps somebody from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife to work with developers. I don't think anyone should be connected to developers in order to fulfill that role. And as I'm sure other people have stated in written testimony, I think it would be beneficial to protect more than 15 to 25% of habitat and to, in the future, incorporate the climate crisis in regards to any other type of future policy that Washington County creates. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I hope you take the time and diligence in creating a finalized version of this ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Galanka. You did great in your first time testifying in a public hearing. Mr. Moss, who's next?
Next, Madam Chair, we have Mr. Jim Long. Jim, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, please go ahead for 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Just to talk about what we've talked about earlier, I remember when Virginia Garcia Memorial Health Center began, and I'm glad to see it's going and very successful. And I'm grateful for your concern for people. We all love and respect all living creatures. And I hope to be grateful for your concerns for wildlife. Wildlife matters too. On Saturday, I saw, excuse me, I just drank some coffee, my throat's a little tight. I saw 4 distinct animals that were not birds, over a few inches in height, or a few feet in height, and I've seen dozens of birds also in that period. So wildlife does exist in Washington County, and it needs some protections also. Wildlife corridors are important. As you know, I'm all about citizen participation and community engagement, but disappointed to hear that communications to the board recently has slowed. Last night, the city of Tigard canceled its scheduled public hearing, and their offices are also closed until further notice due to the pandemic and hazardous smoke. I request for CPO 4M that the Board of Commissioners take testimony ready for today about Ordinance 869 about wildlife habitat, but also continue this hearing due to the pandemic and smoke. A reminder, the Land Conservation Development Commission gave you until May 1st, 2021, because they were sensitive to the difficulties of citizen input during this pandemic. We are also disappointed in the language that the Department of Land Use and Transportation proposed is not objective in many ways. In some ways it's worse, and so currently we oppose the current language in your ordinance. I've submitted the terms that we find that are not objective, including as applicable, more stringent, enhancements, could include, mitigation generally, and these are all important. We're very concerned. We would suggest that independent field verification be included. We've had that on the Crestline site regarding the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and it was very helpful in proving our case. There is also in your language, there is no definition of riparian habitat, wildlife habitat, upland habitat, wetlands, or headwaters in a single location. So it will be easier for the developers, the planners, and the public to distinguish the difference in these terms and applications. We want independent biologists to define those terms and put them in a single place in the code. So please give us, the public, plenty of time to comment on the engrossed language that you're going to come up with in the next few weeks. Our wonderful media has covered other news, very important news over the past few months, but because of the pandemic, little attention has been brought to this significant natural resource issue, and we hope you give us time to really take a good look at it. The LCDC has given you that ability to have that time. Let's use it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Kevin, who's next?
Next, Madam Chair, we have Ashley Short. Ashley, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Chair Harrington, Commissioners, thank you for your time today. I just want to start by saying the ordinance does not go far enough. Tualatin River Keepers had some specific comments regarding language, which we have submitted by in written form, and I won't go into that today. I really just want to stress the importance of getting this ordinance right. As the SNR report from earlier this year noted, the incentive program for wildlife habitat was not working at all. And that report also showcased that community members have felt that SNR protections are not adequate and want the county to do more to protect them and mature trees. Additionally, as we have pointed out before when talking about Clean Water Services hydromodification standards, we are experiencing massive erosion in the urban areas of the county. Poor upland and wildlife protections were a contributing factor to why those sites happened. These ecosystems are interwoven and complex. If we don't manage them from a holistic perspective, then we can expect to have unintended consequences like erosion impacting stormwater structures, pipes, etc. And to remind you, those fixes are costing millions of dollars. The bottom line is we have to protect upland and wildlife habitat and mature trees, or we will continue to see unintended impacts in the riparian areas. Having an ordinance that only protects 25 or 15% of the remaining habitat is not enough to ensure ecosystem functions and values are preserved. Additionally, only protecting trees within the urban growth boundary is not enough to address the concerns raised by the city of Beaverton and community members regarding the cutting of old trees before the cities can annex the area. Washington County can address this by adopting a comprehensive tree code like most other jurisdictions in the Portland metro area already have. Finally, I would just like to remind the commissioners how important having nature close to home is. Having access to nature for all of our community members close to their homes is a quality of life issue. We have been relying on nature close to home to remain sane and healthy in this pandemic. We should not be encouraging development unless it integrates protected, significant natural resources and saves mature trees. Again, this is a quality of life issue for the people who will live in these new communities. Please take action now to help ensure all community members have access to significant natural resources and mature trees within their neighborhoods. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Short. Mr. Moss, who's next?
Next, Madam Chair, we have Ken Dobson. Ken, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead for 3 minutes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Ken Dobson. I'm an attorney, and I represent Jill Warren. And I've been working with the county on this issue for a number of years. So I've been involved in the underlying litigation at the Court of Appeals and the enforcement order at the LCDC. I only have a limited amount of time. I will be submitting more detailed comments, but I wanted to hit on 3 points in the limited time that I have today. First, as pointed out by other members of the public, there's still problems with compliance with the LCD's order that the standards need to be clear and objective. In particular, there is a requirement for the tree preservations in the new ordinance, but there's an alternative way you can comply with it under the language of the new ordinance, and that's if your proposal will meet or exceed the ecological function and value of the outcome of applying the actual requirements. So this sort of discretionary voluntary path to comply with the standards is not clear and objective by any means, and it will result in another appeal to the LCDC if that language is included in the new ordinance. So there needs to be work on that. Another point I want to raise in my limited amount of time is that the proposal is not supported by science or biology. Specifically, the Goal 5 rules require when you're drafting new ordinances, involvement, notification of public agencies. That would certainly include the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, because they are the sort of experts in this field. But unfortunately, ODFW apparently has not been consulted at all about this new ordinance. I note that the county has consulted with and solicited input from almost 24 developers. They hired a private consultant to look at it, but why haven't they looked at contacting the ODFW for their input? They're a knowledgeable agency. They should be kept in the loop. I also note that the new ordinance removes any of all the existing requirements that the county and developers consult with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife on certain applications. They are the agency that is in charge of wildlife habitat. They need to be kept in the loop, and so far they're not. Finally, the county staff is saying that we're going to maintain our current policies. No, what they're proposing by limiting the protection to 15 to 25% of the SNRs, the upland SNRs, they are going contrary to Planning Goal 10, which the first goal of Planning Goal 10 says that the plans and rules that are enacted to preserve these areas must ensure that all reasonable methods for their preservation can be pursued prior to development. All reasonable methods is the current policy as set forth in the comprehensive plan. What the county is proposing is to, quote, lightly protect these areas. That runs contrary to the comprehensive plan. Unless you want to amend the comprehensive plan, if you go with this language, it's going to result in an appeal to the LCDC. Thank you, and I will address this in further hearings and in my forthcoming written comments.
Thank you, Mr. Dobson. I hope that we'll have the opportunity of receiving your written comments in advance of the Planning Commission meeting tomorrow. Who's next, Mr. Moss?
Madam Chair, next we have Ted Labby. Ted, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
All right, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, commissioners, for your service during these unusual times. I want to acknowledge the work that, my name is Ted Labby. I'm Executive Director of the Urban Green Spaces Institute. And I do want to lead off with acknowledging the difficult work that your staff person, Michelle Miller, has done with this. I will be echoing a lot of the comments you've heard earlier, but I think Michelle's done a good job with the limited resources that she has been given with this challenge in front of you. I submitted 2 sets of written comments, and I also testified at the first Planning Commission hearing. I'm not going to go into my detailed comments on those. You have those. I want to acknowledge that I think what you have before proposed approach is a step forward, but it falls short of what we need. And I'm very concerned that the standards are not sufficiently clear and objective to address the court order that's before you. And I agree with those comments before about the 15 to 25% rule. I think it's really problematic. I have years of experience. I'm a biologist, and in my prior life, I worked with local governments in the state of Washington, helping them get fish and wildlife conservation into their codes. And I think we can do a lot better with this, and I think it wouldn't take too much time to dig into those improvements. One of the overarching things that I'm going to talk to in my comments is this lack of a tree code that applies within the county's unincorporated urban areas. You know, Ashley did a great job earlier talking about why that's so important and why we need to get at that now. This has been something that's been going on for years in Washington County, and the county's been struggling with it. The residents have been struggling with it. And I want to acknowledge that it creates confusion for community members, because most cities around these unincorporated areas have tree codes. And so this would be something that would actually help the county if you took the moment to actually develop something right now. And I'd be happy to get into the details of what that might look like. But I think that's all I just want to say right now today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labby.
Chair
Kevin, do we have one more? Oh, go ahead, Jacqueline Sato.
Thank you. Chair Harrington, I've just been noticing now, I'm sorry, I am not that familiar with proceedings before the Board of Commissioners, but I know that For the Planning Commission, when testimony is taken from the public, there is a name and an address. So I just happened to notice that Mr. Labby did not provide an address. So I'm just calling it out just in case that is something that normally happens at the board.
I could provide that now if that would help.
If I may, Madam Chair, all of the public speakers have filled out the online testimony forms that we have for the record. So we do have that address that will be saved in the complete meeting file.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Not a problem. It's important for us to make sure that we are following the appropriate procedures. So thank you very much as our county council representative, Ms. Sato. So Kevin, do we have a couple of more folks for today?
We just appears we just have one more, Madam Chair, Mr. Dale Feek.
Thank you.
Kevin, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I have a question before my time starts. I noticed that when you signed up for this, if you represent a group, you have more than 3 minutes. Is that the rule we are following now?
We are following under the testified, if they put as member of a group and they're just one member, we are giving them 3 minutes.
So I'm a member of a group of Washington County Citizen Action Network. Can I speak for the group and get 5 minutes or more than that?
Our policy has been up to 3 minutes, but I will defer to the chair to confirm that.
Chair Harrington.
Go ahead, Jackie.
Sure. I just, my knowledge of this is, it is true that we give groups a little bit longer time to provide testimony, with the caveat that they are a recognized group. So typically recognized groups are CPOs. So I will, I am not sure exactly whether Mr. Feek's group has been recognized as such, but if he would like to maybe talk a little bit more about what his group does so that we know, what kind of a group it is.
Yes, I'm chair of the Washington County Citizen Action Network. We have board of directors, and we have a web page that lists our mission, when we have our organizational meeting. We have it all laid out. We are a recognized group trying to protect the environment in Washington County.
Mr. Feek, we have had multiple folks today testify on behalf of groups, and they have spoken within 3 minutes. I would ask you to please address us today in 3 minutes as the sole representative of your group. Also, please note that we welcome your written testimony and will be sure to be sharing that with our Planning Commission as part of their deliberations tomorrow evening.
Thank you for addressing my question. Madam Chair, Commissioner Willing, my District 4 Commissioner, and other commissioners. I'm Dale Feek, Chair of the Washington County Citizen Action Network. I read the staff report dated September 8th, 2020, the 188-page report. I read through the whole thing, didn't understand it all, but at least I skimmed it and printed out at least 50 pages. And in that report, there was the WCCAN letter that was sent to the Planning Commission, which I made public comment before the last Planning Commission and asked that that document also be forwarded to you as county commissioners, and it is in your document. So, and I know that the county commissioners have had time is limited, and but as I skimmed all that, I hope you take the time to read in more detail than I did all that public document. At the last Planning Commission meeting and also at the Clean Water Service Advisory Committee meeting, I noticed that Matt Wellner is the vice chair or of the Planning Commission. He's also a board member of the Home Builders Association, and he's I think vice chair of the Planning Commission and also Clean Water Service Advisory Committee. And I just want to point out a couple statements that he made in his written comments, dated on his attachment. He says that establishing clear and objective standards rather than creating new and necessary layers of regulatory requirements is required. Yeah, that is required, but it's very important to make sure that we're protecting our natural resources and not having development get all the land they can to make more money. And as he said, he's read the code all the time. So he's very much aware of codes, and codes are so important, and the legality of it is important. And as I've said many times, and other people have, the devil is in the details. And that's why I really support Ken Dobson's, who's the attorney for Jill Warren, and what he wrote in those documents that you have before you. And there will be further, with LCDC will take more time if you don't get it right. There is nothing wrong with taking more time and not meeting this current deadline so a few people can develop their land. I totally support the urban green spaces, the Tualatin River Keepers, and in particular, Ken Dobson representing Jill Warren. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feek. Mr. Moss, do we have anyone else testified to speak in today's public hearing?
We do not, Madam Chair.
Okay, and with that, that concludes today's public hearing, and we're going to be continuing our public hearing to September 29th, which is an evening meeting, just to make sure that everyone is aware of that. As mentioned, our Planning Commission will be holding a meeting tomorrow evening, September 16th as well. And from there, on the 29th, we will get new information from our staff for a potential engrossment decision. Are there any other questions from the commission at this time with our staff?
Chair Harrington, if you wouldn't mind taking a motion and a second and a vote on the decision to continue the hearing, I think that would be advisable.
After or before comments?
Oh, after. So the motion in order would be afterwards. I just wanted to make sure that we follow the procedure that we're supposed to. So I was listening, and it almost sounded like we weren't going to go there. So I'm just being hyper protective of the process.
Quite all right. It's really important to do ordinances right, especially in the land use space. So all assistance is welcome, Ms. Sato, no problem.
I appreciate your patience.
Commissioner, questions or comments?
Yes.
Commissioner Rogers.
Thank you. As I said earlier in my remarks, this is a very difficult one because you're threading a needle on what's clear and objective, and you're also having property owners who have a right to do with what they want with their property within reason. And so we've got to look at all of the issues involved. I do like talking to Stephen the other day, Roberts, and I do like the idea of having some more time. This is just too complicated in a shorter period. But one of the things that I asked him that I thought might be important for others of you to hear, and I don't know if he's got an exact number yet, Stephen, but I asked him how many parcels were impacted by this particular issue in the county. And do you have a current number so that we know how big a issue this is in terms of land mass?
I don't have a specific number, and I'll look to Michelle or Andy or Teresa if they want to chime in on that question. I think at this time, we're not aware of any current development applications, or maybe just one that may be on hold as a result of the current injunction. In terms of the number of parcels that potentially could be affected, it's going to be a larger number, but I don't have that number available right now.
So just to clarify, what we're dealing with in terms of today and the coming meetings that we have, one in process and two that's applied. So two properties. There's two properties that are being held up by this. Is that an accurate statement?
I think, Andy, do you want to jump in there, or do you have a better number?
I think the number is 2 or 3 in terms of active people who have come to the counter or called us up and were frustrated that they couldn't develop. How many people are aware of the situation and therefore haven't contacted us because they know they can't go forward until it's resolved? We don't have that number.
And my follow-up question is, if we, again, no matter what we do, I suspect it'll be litigated, but delays are caused by litigation. And so if we don't take the time and it's litigated, aren't we still back in the same position as if we took a little longer and got it right? And it seems like intuitive to me, but maybe not to anybody else.
I think there's 2 issues. There's lifting the injunction, and then there's questions about the ordinance itself and whether it meets Goal 5 and the other state planning rules, and those are 2 different things potentially. So the injunction could be lifted and somebody could still be appealing the ordinance. Jackie might want to chime in here a little bit if she thinks I misstated.
No, that's correct. That's correct, Andy. So the decision on the ordinance is separate from the enforcement order. So, you know, the enforcement order is going to have a life of its own, because the enforcement order just said, although I'm kind of sorry I said just. It's a little ambiguous, but basically the enforcement order orders the county to adopt an ordinance that addresses the clear and objective requirement in section 422. So that's pretty broad. On the other hand, we could also face an appeal at LUBA based on, you know, any type of procedural error that could be perceived, or on the substantive issue itself. And if any of the commissioners or Chair Harrington, if you have any other specific questions you'd like me to answer related to how this litigation could potentially roll out, I'd be happy to answer.
Well, from my standpoint, I'm looking forward to continued work by the Planning Commission at their work tomorrow evening, and then a additional context provided by yourself and our land use staff in advance or at our September 29th meeting. So I don't have any other specific questions, but I would like to turn it over to you if you have any additional points that you want to share with us at this time.
I have no further general points to share at this time, just if anybody had any questions.
Okay, so I'll just do the round robin for commissioner questions. Commissioner Rogers, do you have anything more at this time? Okay, Commissioner Schouten, Vice Chair Schouten.
No, I don't. This is partly a moving target because there's going to be some significant changes in the next couple of weeks. There'll be additional revisions and amendments, and so there's really no point in having any questions at this time. So I'm not.
All righty, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Treese?
No further questions. I agree with Commissioner Schouten. Thank you.
Commissioner Willie?
Yeah, I don't have any other questions either, and I have noted several of the sections that have been referred to in the testimony today, so I'll be interested in tracking those in the next steps. So thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. I would just add that as Commissioner Rogers noted, this is a complex topic, and we do want to make sure we're doing a good job. This ordinance is a poster child for why this commission has advanced a charter change, a simple charter change to the November 3rd ballot, because our charter currently requires us to pause our land use work by the end of October through the month of February. So we have to pause any and all deliberations, or try to really judiciously get them enacted before the end of October. So that's all I'd like to add at this time. So we have a motion and a second to continue today's public hearing. All those in favor?
No, Madam Chair, no one has made the motion as of yet.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. What are the wishes of the commission with regard to such a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair, to continue to September 29th, was it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you, commissioners. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you, commissioners. So that brings us to the end of our public hearings today. Next item on our agenda, I'm noting the time as 12:51, and I know my stomach is grumbling, is our second oral communications time session. Mr. Moss, do we have anyone signed up?
Yes, we do, Madam Chair. We have Kumar. Kumar, can you hear us?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
Clerk Moss, I can hear.
The
Please,
floor is
please
yours,
go
sir.
ahead for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Board of Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you for providing me this opportunity for oral public testimony today. My name is Kumar Naharaja. I've been a resident of Washington County since December 2017. The item of interest that I want to call the board's attention today is on the work session agenda, item number 5, Introduction to Limited English Assistance Policy and Procedure. I understand it's slated to begin at 2 p.m. this afternoon. The draft, I want to call the board's attention to the draft on item number 5 under Summary of Topic. It reads, Washington County strives to be fully accessible to every resident in our community, regardless of their national origin or language preference. The attachment A, which is the language services card on the front side, however, includes county-wide safe harbor languages, which includes 11 languages, but is conspicuously missing languages spoken by the Asian Indian population. As an individual providing oral testimony and not on behalf of any organization, I request the board to consider including at least one or, if possible, 2 Asian Indian languages spoken by the Asian Indian community, namely Hindi and Telugu. Hindi is spoken predominantly in northern India, and Telugu is a South Indian language. There are many languages in Indian subcontinent, and the county may remain flexible and make accommodations or include as and when need arises to include more languages. I base my request on US Census data release date April 2020, titled Asian and Pacific Islander Population in the US, which shows that Asian Indian population constitutes 4.5 million, spanning the entire US, standing second only to the Chinese population, excluding the Taiwanese, which is 5.1 million across the US. The numbers that I mentioned is approximate. The data source cited by the document is the 2018 American Community Survey 1-year estimates. I also urge the board to have a look at the US Census data on language spoken by those who speak English less well, segregated by census tract across Washington County, Oregon. For example, Census Tract 31706, Washington County, Oregon, shows that language spoken by those who speak English less well at 13.5% at the Spanish the Spanish population is 13.5%, and the Asian Pacific Islander languages is listed as 7.1%. And if you go to Census Tract 323, Washington County, Oregon, the Spanish population is 5.5%, and those who speak Asian and Pacific Islander languages 4.6%. And it varies across the county. If you look at Census Tract 330, it's lowest at 0.3% for Asian and Pacific Islander and 6.4% for Spanish. So again, I would urge the board to consider including at least one Asian Indian language spoken by the Asian Indian population, namely Hindi, and remain flexible to include other languages as and when need arises. Thank you.
Thank you, Kumar. Mr. Moss has your contact information from your signing up for testimony today. Please know that we pulled that agenda item earlier this morning because of some needs, including wanting to ensure that our incoming Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, who is heading the new Office of Equity and Community Engagement, has the opportunity to participate in this proposal. At this time, Ms. Tanya Angie, our County Administrative Officer, I just want to ask, I don't know at this time if you have any particular time frame by which that work session topic will be coming back on a future agenda, or at a minimum, could we make sure that Mr. Kumar receives an email when we, in advance of our having that proposal coming before us at a future meeting?
Thank you, Chair Harrington. And we don't have a definitive date. As the speaker was speaking, I was taking notes and then also emailing the staff team. And they will get the speaker's contact information and connect with him to ensure that his concerns are heard and addressed.
Thank you. Mr. Moss, do we have anyone else signed up?
We do not, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Next on our agenda are board announcements. I just want to announce that, I was incorrect earlier when I stated the September 29th meeting was an evening meeting. It appears that next week, September 22nd, we have a work session at 2 in the afternoon and a board meeting in the evening. And then the following week, Tuesday, September 29th, which will include our significant natural resource topic of earlier, we'll have a work session in the morning at 8:30 and then our board meeting at 10 in the morning. So my apologies to everyone for that mistake, and I'm not sure if that creates a burden, Ms. Sato, on our staff to let the folks know who testified tonight that that meeting will be a daytime meeting versus an evening meeting. Hopefully by now you've all seen that we're postponing for the second time the State of the County address. And then before we know it, we're greeting the month of October. And the board members, as the Board for Clean Water Services, will be attending the virtual annual WEFTEC conference. So on Thursday, October 1st, we'll have our round table at 10 in the morning, and then our board meetings for the following Tuesday, October 6th, are canceled. And then we'll reconvene the following week, October 13th. With an extended work session at least. Are there any other board announcements at this time?
Maybe just, go ahead, Roy.
Oh, okay, thank you, Jack. I just, a schedule check. My clock says right now we're supposed to be meeting with the CARES Northwest folks. This meeting went a lot longer. I would hope they'd indulge us maybe at 2 o'clock or something. We have to have a break. That's just
Yes, we absolutely need a minimum of a half an hour, but after this,
no.
I wanted to ask commissioners, did you want a half an hour, 45 minutes, or an hour? Ms. Angie?
So the presenters for this afternoon have all been notified and they're on standby to listen to board's decisions. So they're flexible with the start time. So I would suggest you take the break that you feel you need.
I would advocate for 1 hour, please. That would be till 2 o'clock.
Commissioners, you okay with that? We have 2 items on the agenda this afternoon, followed by time certain where we need to be done for another event at 4 p.m. But that does give us enough time for the 2 remaining topics on the agenda. Everybody all set? 2 o'clock.
I'm okay with an hour step. 2 o'clock.
Okay. All right. With that, are there any other board announcements?
I would just comment that the rift off of the chair's comments, that will be, that meeting on the 29th is the 5th Tuesday. We don't often or always meet on the 5th Tuesday, but towards the end of ordinance season, that's not unusual for us to do that, and they're typically morning sessions. Thank you.
Yep, and we wanted to make sure with the way October was starting up with WEFTEC that we had the opportunity to engage with our staff, given that a lot is going on with normal county business, let alone 2 different emergencies at the same time. So thank you, commissioners, for your flexibility. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously 5-0. See you at 2 o'clock.
Right. Thank you, commissioners.
Bye-bye. Have a good lunch.